Welcome. I'm Halcyon, and this is Hug Nation. Boy, do I have a lot I want to share today. I think we will get started by talking about an epiphany that I had regarding my book. If you've been following along, you know that I've been writing my memoirs. I actually sat down to write a book. I thought it was going to be the lessons that I have been sharing and kind of working through as a part of Hug Nation, like this broadcast, the kind of topics and tricks and tips and things that I read about or stumble upon on my life journeys, and thought it would be like a self-help collection of tools. But got permission from my coach, Jesse Gross, to just like let it out. Just honor the muse and let it out. Don't think about if it's good or bad. Don't think about who's going to read it. Just honor the muse and let things come out. And what came out was not what I expected. What came out was quite a few stories from my life that I had not thought about in a long time. A lot of stories in my life that I like to share privately around campfires, but generally not things that I share publicly online anymore. I had some chapters in my life online where I was pushing edges, we'll say. And so as I sat down to write, I started to write more of these down and more of these down. All the while, every time I would go, I can't tell anybody this, or what if my parents read this? I had to go, shh, just let it out, just let it out, just let it out. Somebody recently shared that on Elizabeth Gilbert's podcast, she kind of reaffirmed the advice that every writer gets or gives, which is that, you just got to sit in the chair. Just sit down to write no matter what. Even if it's crap that you're writing. And her kind of addition to that was you have to practice, and just be in the practice of writing so that when the muse does tap you on the shoulder, one, you're ready, and two, you have the skills necessary to articulate what the muse wants you to say. Love that. And her book, Big Magic, goes deeper into the idea of the muse and the muse's role in artistic expression and creation, which is super helpful if you're feeling kind of overwhelmed by the responsibility of creative creation. So I'm writing down all of these stories, and this last week got to a point where I had written down most of the stories that I thought I had, most of the stories that I tell around a campfire, most of the stories that, if you hang out with me for more than a few festivals, you've probably heard some of them multiple times. And so I was talking with my coach, and he said, cool, print it all out. And I was like, are you serious? This Word doc is 238 pages. And he's like, look, it's important to have it in your hands. See it. See so that you can put chapters and spread it out over a room, and you can kind of visualize things. And I was like, okay, all right. Okay, I can handle killing half a tree and a bucket of ink. So printed it out, put it all over my house, and all of a sudden things started to pop out at me, just like Jesse said they would. First, there was about 6 or 7 stories where I was like, oh, these are not relevant. These are not part of this, anything else that's here. Maybe they will be someday. Maybe it's another book. Maybe I'll rethink what this book is about. Because that's part of the process too, is like, I don't exactly know what the themes of this book are. I'm not exactly sure what the narrative arc of this book is. I'm not even sure if it's going to be a book. Maybe it's just going to be a collection of stories that I can put aside now just to purge them from my system so that I can then allow the muse to tap me on the shoulder for the next project. So I'm looking through all these things, and I'm realizing that I have a challenge. And I've kind of, this keeps creeping up, and I've just been like, not yet, don't think about this yet. But a number of my stories, and this is a common theme in my life, that there are elements of my experiences and my adventures where if you take something out of context, it's very easy to judge me or label me or see it as base or less evolved than maybe that it would feel to me if I was able to explain the whole thing. If I was able to say, no, this isn't just a picture of me naked. This is being midway in the process of coming to terms with my shame. This is me in the process of learning to love myself. Yes, it looks like I'm being a narcissist, but it's actually an evaluation and a inquiry into my insecurities. But, you know, it doesn't look like that with a screenshot. And so I was thinking, like, how do a lot of these stories have to do with my sexuality and my journey through sexuality, especially in the context of like exhibitionism and the public sharing of aspects of my intimate life. There was a quote that made it into the MTV documentary that they did about my house when I lived in the webcam house. And there's this quote where I said, you know, people say to us, you know, that, you know, your sex life should be private because it's sacred. And I'm like, going to church is sacred and it's not private. So I was trying to look at all these things and I'm like, how do I share these stories in a way that doesn't make me come across as being a jerk? You know, just a bunch of sexual stories, and they're not all sexual stories. There's just enough of them that that's a theme. And I, as I'm looking at all of these things, all these stories and all of these memories and all of these things, and I kind of had this epiphany. And so let me try to express it. This is not the short version of that story. Thanks for your patience. So when I was in junior high, I would go on these trips to Lose Records in Encinitas with friends. One of our moms would drive us there. And Lose Records was like the alternative place where you could get imports and, you know, singles and B-sides and rare stuff from all sorts of cool, I guess they'd call them now indie bands, new wave, people like Simple Minds and The Cure, Susie and the Banshees, Sisters of Mercy. And I would love going there, one, because I could collect rare records that made me feel like I was cool and alternative. But two, the people that went there were amazing to me. They were crazy colored hair and funky makeup. They were goths and punkers and spikes and just like, to me, just these Nietzsche supermen and women that are outside the rules of society. Just like, I mean, how do you get there from here? Like, I am so scared. I am so trying so hard to fit in. How do you break through to be this? You know, of course, now I know that probably most of those people were just like suffering inside and dealing with all sorts of insecurities, just like all of us are. And one reaction to that is to absolutely go in the other direction, say, I refuse to deal with the pressures of societal norms, so I am going to follow a whole different set of followers' rules and wear the exact same uniform that a punker wears or a goth wears. But that's a different story. And so I went from this like so desire to be an outsider and not knowing how, and then fell into this discovery of rap music. I went to junior high and high school that had kind of bust integration. So we had people side by side that didn't live side by side, but were going to school even though we were from different economic backgrounds and cultures and races. So I got this really intimate introduction to rap very early and got super into it. And I just kept going deeper and deeper and deeper. And instead of going to Lose Records, I started going to Tower Records. And they had a whole section of 12 inches. And I would just go through it and be like, anything that had the word DJ in it, I'd be like, ooh. Or MC, I'm like, ooh. And man, did I get some crappy records. But I also got some amazing stuff, you know, like Ice-T, that I'd never heard of him. I'm like, who is this guy? And then put it on, Dog in the Wax. Looking back now and listening to some of those early tracks that I thought were just amazing, they're a little simplistic, but there is a beauty and an art form to simple beats as well. Anyway, so I get super deep into rap. Start listening to the more progressive, educational, kind of culture-confronting MCs like KRS-One and like Chuck D with Public Enemy. And start listening to the lyrics and hearing references to names of people that I'd never heard of, people like Louis Farrakhan, people like Huey Newton, the Black Panthers, Malcolm X. And so I started reading these books, the autobiography of Malcolm X, reading it multiple times and reading about the 10-point plan of the Black Panthers. Started going to the SWAT meet and getting T-shirts, with Rasta colors and the faces of Huey Newton on it and Malcolm X, and feeling like I was like a part of this anti-establishment alternative movement. And a few things happened along the way after going to a whole bunch of concerts and seeing a whole bunch of rap shows where I definitely, among my small pocket of suburban white kids, we were very much the minority in these, crowds of rap fans. And a few just like moments that were like, oh, this is not my fight. At best, I can be an ally. At best, I can be supportive, but there's something not cool about stepping into the front lines of someone else's fight and picking up the flag. I was definitely a tourist. And it was kind of crushing because I was like, I felt like I felt like I was a part of this thing that felt real and felt like me, and it felt like with a wall to push against. It gave me this identity, and then I felt like I wasn't welcome there. And this was in college when it really hit me, and kind of stumbled around and got pretty depressed and like, what's the point of anything? And had this crazy epiphany in Turkey, which I've spoken about in the past, where I had this epiphany on a mountaintop that the point of life was to merely experience life, to appreciate the gift. If the world is a zoo, during your waking hours, visit as many of the exhibits, see as many of the animals as possible. And through that awakening, I said yes to all these things that delivered me to the internet and to Burning Man. And the two of those things, my Mama Earth and Father Sky of my creation myth, the two of those things taught me that even though I'm a white male and I have all this privilege, there is a war to be fought that my skills, that my gifts should be of service to. And that was radical self-expression, being who we are, that there is this massive oppressive force keeping people from being their true selves. And so that's the battle that I took on. And as I stepped into it more and more, and as I listened more and more to what I felt like my calling was, repeatedly I kept feeling like a big part of what I was called to do, a big part of what I felt like my talents could be the most of service for, is in dealing with sexual shame. And that there was so much embarrassment and shame and subverted impulses in our culture and the world that find their way into aggression and violence and communication issues. So much of it that stems from these repressed sexual feelings that I had in me and that everyone had in them. And so I made open sexual conversation and expression and sharing a part of my life and my art. And a lot of these chapters that came out, a lot of the stories that came out, a lot of this middle part of my life was about following what felt like my authentic truth into these scary, societally judged places of sexual openness in an attempt to confront shame, in an attempt to heal the world, in an attempt to do good in an artistic, creative, love-filled way. But if you take any of it out of context, you could say it's smut, it's shallow, it's base. So I think the challenge for me, if I eventually find this into a publishable format, is how do I tell this story in a way that honors the authenticity and the truth and the love How do I honor this in a way that if you saw the whole arc and saw the whole story, that you would say, oh, all right, that's a valid path. That's a proud path. That is a shame-free path. Good on ya. I recognize that no matter what, there will be people that will be unable to accept it. And perhaps that will be the next major step of my warrior path, of my courage required, is to face this dragon of judgment and potentially of doors slamming and of opportunities closing, just by the very nature of not being apologetic and not acknowledging that I should be shameful because of being a sexual being, and making my sexuality into something that is not, well, I don't care what you do as long as you do it in the privacy of your own home. Well, then you do care what I do. And whatever it is about my truth that you're telling me that I can't express, that leaks into everything else. And that was one of the reasons that I was originally called to be a sex activist, was because for many people, sexuality is a truly unique place where you do feel a connection to something deeper, something transcendental. And it's a place where you can't fake it. You can't mask your biological turn-ons. And so there's this crack in the mask, in the pretend of our lives, in our sexuality, that I think is precious and can be used as a backdoor, pardon the pun, to our spirituality. So now, I did have a chapter where I almost brought tons of consequences and shame upon my family because I did all these things under my full real name. And that was the end of that chapter, which deflected me into the welcoming arms of my grandpa, which began the next chapter, which I feel like in many ways I'm still in. But that arc, those dark places, those soot-covered dragons that I had to befriend, is a part of this. And I think it all stems from that early days when I was craving a way to make the world more free, craving a way to deal with the walls of oppression in the world, but then finding myself as this rebel without a cause and not knowing what to do with myself. And then Burning Man on the internet saying, here's what you can do. Be a warrior for self-expression. Be a warrior for radical self-expression, even if that bleeds into the bedroom. So, we shall see if at any point these stories make it into a published work. If you're super curious, I have been sharing them on my Patreon page as they come through me, which is patreon.com/halcyon. But you can be patient, and I'm sure they will make it to some format that you can read publicly at some point, because I'm not so good at keeping secrets. Thank you for letting me share this with you and being a part of the journey together. It is this community, digitally, physically, spiritually, this heart-centered recalibration that gives me the strength and hopefully gives you the strength to be that authentic self that is the activism that the world needs. Thank you. I love you. And if you are enjoying all this stuff and you're like, man, I can't believe he gives this all away for free. Well, you can help support me via my Patreon page, which is patreon.com/halcyon. That almost rhymes. And perhaps one of my upcoming offerings will be a rap. Patreon and Halcyon go on and on. Take me away, Calgon. Okay. Wanted to say thank you to the 30 people who have signed up to be supporters of mine through Patreon. Patreon.com/halcyon. As little as $1 a month, you can get access to additional content that I've been creating, the drafts of my book chapters, and just as kind of a vote from the universe saying we want more of this in the world, which I so appreciate. Definitely not required, definitely no additional love that you get from me. I love you no matter what. And if you're not feeling resource rich, but still want to be supportive, there's a bunch of things you can do to help me out. You can subscribe to me on iTunes or YouTube. You can leave me a review on iTunes. You can, what else? You can, if you're watching this on Facebook, you can set me to see first so that I show up more accessibly in your feed. But you know what? You don't have to do anything. You just have to be you. Being you is the greatest gift you can give to me and the world and yourself, because all of those things are all part of the one, which you embody and embrace and celebrate just by being you. So thank you.